Hi, this is Billy Earl here on Eastern Shore Politics. Jamie Dykes, ad interim state's attorney, is our guest today, and we are just pleased as we can be to have her here. Jamie, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come by.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Wonderful. Your journey in law is a little bit different than most people. Please tell us about it.
I will say that I was born and raised on the east side of WICOMICO in the town of Parsonsburg. There, I was involved in the Parsonsburg Volunteer Fire Company, along with my mom, who's treasurer to this day, and my sisters. I went to Parkside High School, Salisbury University, University of Baltimore, and I wanted to help people in a different way. But I didn't want to go to law school for 7 years, or the total journey being 7 years. I got an accounting degree at Salisbury University, then Salisbury State. I practiced for a few years and decided that that was a little bit too confining for me. So I did what I always wanted to do, and that was go to law school. Once I graduated law school, I was a clerk for the Honorable Brett W. Wilson in Dorchester County Circuit Court. And one day I received a call from Wayne Lowe, victim witness coordinator in Wycomico County State's Attorney's Office. Wayne was my DARE teacher from the 6th grade.
Wow.
Wayne asked if I'd come interview for an opening that they had for an assistant state's attorney. And I knew that if I didn't say yes, that I would always want to know if I was good enough, if I could be a litigator.
Okay.
There's been no turning back since then.
There's a real magic to litigation, isn't there?
There is. It's I tell my prosecutors in the office now, we have 18 of them total, that they're like trauma surgeons, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a fast-paced public safety dream to be a prosecutor, to be on the front lines fighting those fights. But it's also stressful and exhausting at times. There's a lot of responsibility that my prosecutors take on every day.
Okay. And how did the folks feel about this?
The folks, my parents,
yeah.
My mom is really proud. My dad's deceased, but I've got a really great stepdad. But they couldn't be prouder. They couldn't be prouder. Right? Fair to say.
They come from another discipline, though, don't they?
They do. They do. My family, my sisters, cousins, mom were all in the medical profession, or they were in the medical profession. I was an EMT when I turned 16.
Okay.
But I wanted to help people. I just didn't want to touch them. I'm not sure we should say that. But I think that's my background in medical, my family's background in medical. I think that's where I get wanting to help people.
Couldn't hurt. Yeah. Couldn't hurt at all. Tell me about your race.
So I was appointed ad interim state's attorney by the Honorable Jimmy Sarbanes.
Yes.
In December, after Ella stepped down. I was the only person that had filed at that point in time. So Seth Mitchell has filed to run against me. So we will have a contested election in the general on November 6th.
Got it. What do you think the main issues for this race are?
By far, violent crime.
Yeah.
We have a violent crime problem in Wycomico County, especially within the city. That relates to drug crime, because drug dealers require guns to keep their stash, keep their territory. And with that comes gang activity. And with that comes the recruitment of juveniles who are vulnerable. So there's a lot of most of our violent crime in the county can be tied to juvenile offenders, 16, 17, up through early 20s.
You know, it's an amazing thing. Although I spent a significant amount of time in Texas, when Daddy got sick, he had Alzheimer's. And Mother was just putting herself in a grave because many times the caretaker is under as much pressure as the victim of the infirmity. But strangely enough, where I grew up was College Park, Maryland, and right next door is a little community called Langley Park, and Langley Park has been described by law enforcement officials as the most violent, gang-controlled place in America.
Wow.
6 miles from the White House, and it's MS-13. They have taken a foothold there, and some of the stories that the Washington Post, among other outlets, has, I guess, pushed the narrative beyond just, we have gang activity, we have gang crime. But what they've really talked about is the use of young people by these gangs, to do crimes that they feel are serious, and these young people won't be adjudicated as harshly. But two, it appears to be a way into the families of these people. So now the parents are under the gun, the grandparents are, and it's a question of controlling their income and stealing from them and using them as mules. And it's a horrendous situation. How do you view gang activity here in WICOMICO and specifically in the Barry?
Gang activity, we have, I think it's over 200, maybe close to 300 Bloods. Bloods are and their sects are our largest gang population. We have others,
Wow, I didn't know that.
I think the stats are with a population of 33,000, I think, that's in Salisbury City. The one in 150 people is a gang member or affiliated,
right.
with gangs. That's a huge problem. That's staggering.
It is.
To think about that and the effect upon our public safety. The reality is that you're right. The trend that we've seen here is that juveniles are put up to committing the violent crime, and they're doing that sometimes because of the penalties in the juvenile system are, of course, less than the adult system.
Is it the viewpoint of most of law enforcement that when a young person goes into an incarceratory environment, that their knowledge and willingness to participate in crime usually just gets enhanced?
Sometimes it's interesting because I talk to people that are in the juvenile system, people who are employed, in services for juveniles, and they talk about. Excuse me. I talk to people who service juvenile offenders, and they talk about how children, when they're in placement, do really well. And they want to do better, and then they come home and maybe their parents, their guardians haven't done the work that they have. So they're those juveniles are being placed back in a situation where they've worked really hard for a matter of months, if not years, to do better, and then they're placed back in a home situation that doesn't support that better.
Right.
So that's what I see. That's what I'm told is the issue. But certainly, when juveniles are placed in an adult facility, certainly there has to be some element that don't come out better. That get smarter.
I assume when they come out that they are targeted by the gangs for re-entry into that world.
In some instances, probably the contact has never ceased to some extent.
Oh yeah.
But certainly they're more readily available that way once they're back in.
Okay, but most of this is driven by drugs.
Yes.
Tell me more about that. Tell me more about what it is that is creating this vicious circle.
Drugs are profitable, and they are some ways. It's certainly an easy way in some respects to make money, in that you don't have to punch a time clock every day.
Lack of corporate structure.
Lack of corporate structure. And so drugs are profitable for people that maybe don't have other life skills or aren't motivated by, what might keep you and I, from doing wrong. The moral component.
Are we talking about heroin?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's we not all of it's funny, not quite sure how to say this. We have dealers that are motivated by profit and they're not using. And then we have people who are motivated to buy drugs and they're committing violent crime, burglaries, robberies, in order to get money to buy drugs.
Jamie, your journey here is interesting and unusual, but now you're here. Tell us a little bit about what has shaped you, what you've been involved with here, and how it's changed you as a person and as a law enforcement professional.
So my first 9 years at the WICOMICO County State's Attorney's Office, the vast majority of that, probably more than 7, my assignment was with the WICOMICO Child Advocacy Center. The WICOMICO Child Advocacy Center is a multidisciplinary partnership where the goal is to effectively investigate and prosecute cases of child abuse and neglect, and the life crisis piece helps us treat the victims of child abuse.
Okay.
So working hand in hand every day with the Department of Social Services, all the law enforcement agencies in the county, and Life Crisis, and helping victims through the process, child victims. It seems to me I bring a perspective where I know the impact of violent crime, and specifically crimes against children, the effect upon them individually, the effect upon that crime as it relates to in their family and in the community. So in many respects, we talk about drugs and guns and gangs. It's easy for me to see the writing on the wall for some of these defendants.
Yeah.
And how it...
I have known in my life people who were involved in gang situations, primarily through my sister, who is a career prosecutor out in Fort Worth, Texas. And she has been involved with not only crimes against children, but also the gang task force out there, which is pretty substantial because in a city like Fort Worth and in the area of the Metroplex, it is a real target. I always found it fascinating that in many ways what was being sold to youth was a sense of belonging and a replacement for a family structure that in their life simply didn't exist. Mm-hmm. You've seen the same thing, I suspect.
I have. We all want a sense of belonging. We want to know that we matter to somebody. So when children, we learn how to treat each other in our family and in society. So if children don't have a sense of that people love them, that people are going to nurture them, are going to make decisions and make sacrifices for those children, if those children are left to fend for themselves, they end up believing that no one cares about them.
Right.
Why are they going to care about anybody else? But they're going to look for that sense of belonging. And many times it's my belief they find that in a gang because those people always have each other's backs.
Right. A little bit like the military, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. And it's unfortunate, I suppose, that they don't make the military choice before. The gangs take a hold of them, much earlier in life. And many times with the acquiescence, if not active participation of the parents.
Wow. You're facing an election here that basically is going to be a referendum in many ways on the philosophy and the management of your office. Mm-hmm. Tell the people that are watching this, either on PAC 14, where the most exciting stuff happens in the Berry, and also on YouTube. And for those of you out in Texas in law enforcement, and you know who I'm talking about out there in Azle, Texas, Mr. Sheriff, the management of a significant law enforcement office is so much more difficult than people think. Tell us a little bit about what your experience has been.
I have 18 prosecutors, 18 administrative staff, so almost 40 employees.
Yeah.
And I have the best of the best.
Okay.
The office has been set in motion because of the great work of its predecessors to have excellent experience. We're prosecuting, when I came into office, 18 homicides. We just got a guilty yesterday on one of those.
Okay.
So we have 12 felony prosecutors that prosecute only felonies in the circuit court.
Okay.
Those people, I've broken them out, changed the structure a bit to allow for specialization, because I think that that's where we get the best result. I want to invest in people that have a specialized skill set to focus on and handle similar crimes in a consistent fashion.
In a consistent fashion, okay.
So I want one defendant, defendants who commit the same crimes should reap the same benefit or accountability, level of sentencing. So it's important for me to have that consistency regardless of the prosecutor assigned. Mm-hmm. So I have designated leaders, team leaders, to oversee those 12 prosecutors under them, or 3 or 4, depending on which team we're talking about. I think I've gone off on a tangent. My leadership comes from my experience in prosecuting.
Yeah.
And that is where the benefit is, because I'm not asking any one of my people to do something that I wouldn't do and haven't done many times myself.
Okay.
So that's the benefit.
What other issues do you think are pertinent in this race?
Partnerships. So it's incredibly important in order for the state's attorney's office and law enforcement generally in the county, for us to keep our streets safe,
right? For
us to work together. And that's what I have. I've worked side by side since the beginning. In 2006, when I became a prosecutor, I have always worked closely with law enforcement, and that has only grown. The sheriff's office, the city police, right. Salisbury City, Fruitland, Del Mar, we have relationships such that if the chiefs are having an issue or an officer's having an issue, they pick up the phone and call me, and the same is true in return. That communication, that relationship is crucial to the effective enforcement of the criminal laws.
Interjurisdictional cohesion is an issue that most taxpayers probably just assume arguendo takes place, but in real life, many times it does not.
It doesn't, and we all have a similar mission, but we all need to realize that we work together in order to do that. And any failings that I've ever seen come from egos in law enforcement, unfortunately. And we don't have those hurdles. We don't have those hurdles.
No, that's a blessing. What else do you think is fodder for this election that people are going to want to know about you?
Oh, goodness. I suppose, I think my experience speaks for itself.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Well, experience is a huge component of this.
Yeah. So my fighting crime for essentially the last 12 years and working really hard, being committed to that. This is a calling. Just like if you're a police officer or a paramedic or a firefighter, a nurse, a teacher, our occupations as prosecutors, it is a calling.
Yeah.
And if you're not in this for the right reason, if you're not in this to protect people, then this isn't the job for you.
Yeah.
And so I think my experience the fact that I recognize this as a calling, my commitment to this county. This is where I was born, and this is where I will die. I am certain. I want to make it a better place, Bill. I want my kids. I have 2 little boys that I want to make this their home. I want them to contribute to this community and to make a difference. I want everybody's life in this county to be better, and I'm committed to helping that effort.
As part of making that effort to do this, I know that the people that you work with is a really strong component of this, and obviously you feel very strongly about them. What do you think about the future of WICOMICO County and the future of law enforcement here?
I think it's promising. But there's a lot of work to do. You know, we are. I think there was one survey. I think we're 9th most violent city or jurisdiction in the country.
One of the areas I think that voters want to look at is how the future is going to be impacted by the people that they vote for, and they're obviously looking for people who are wise and compassionate, but in law enforcement, they're also looking for people that are wise and are effective and work well with others and work collaboratively, especially with other law enforcement jurisdictions. But I guess what it really comes down to is they're looking for people that have that love for the job, which you obviously do, but also the skills to work in an area that, let's be frank, is dangerous, highly dangerous.
By one survey, Salisbury is the 9th most dangerous city in the U.S. Based on 2015 crime numbers. What I will say is that the future of Wicomico County, because of the commitment of myself, my prosecutors, and law enforcement generally, is promising.
Yeah.
But we have a great deal of work to do.
Well, this drug scourge is a real disappointment. I know that when I moved back here in 2012, I've been living in Dallas, and I was aware that they had a prescription pill problem. And I knew that some of the kids in an area north of Dallas, because my niece was going to school up there, were involved with a product called cheese. And it was a mixture of heroin and a Sudafed base, which I thought was bizarre because when I was a kid, we had heard of heroin, but it was not a drug that we found in our neighborhoods. And there was not I guess this desperate attempt to leave the world of opioid pills and find a substitute for it, either because the doctor had been foreclosed from writing those scripts or somehow supply had been diminished. But when I moved here, I was shocked, and a friend of mine, Mike Farlow, over in Worcester County, and I'm trying to think of the old state's attorney's office there, Joel Todd. By the way, to his son, Jacob, who I understand is not playing as much piano, but is now selling real estate. If I was buying real estate, I'd buy it from you, especially when you start that striding stuff. Anyway, they made the case to me that one of the unfortunate aspects of being in law enforcement is as good a job as they had done in stemming the tide of pill opioids resulted in nothing more than just a new market being created. Was that kind of your observation down here in Wicomico?
Yes, and unfortunately, even when the heroin supply sort of diminished, then we have fentanyl and the analogs that come from that. Additionally, we have now seen, now that opioids, we're cracking down on them, we're seeing a rise in cocaine use. Really? Yes.
So every time you whack a mole in one area, another mole comes up. Now, what is an analog?
So I'm reluctant to speak on things I don't know exactly about, but they change a chemical component such that it's not illegal yet.
Okay.
We have it's the same thing as like K2 and spice and
Yeah.
all that. So they change a chemical component, and then the feds have to issue a
Right.
policy, a reg, allowing it to now be scheduled such that it's against the law. But there are carfentanil, and the analogs we've been seeing come from China. So I'd want to talk to my drug czar, Trish Coletta, to get details on that. But that's how it's explained to me.
Well, you're way over my head already. I read something the other day that was absolutely shocking, that one of the sources of massive importation of fentanyl into this country comes from Canada.
Really?
Yeah, I forget what the source of it. It might have been Commentary Magazine, but there was a huge operation that was shut down in the far western part of Canada, which I believe is Saskatchewan or Calgary, one of those. But it was producing thousands and thousands of pills, many of which were mislabeled.
Counterfeit.
Why would somebody? I know there was something the other day in the news about Prince when he died, that he was taking fentanyl, but he didn't know it. It was labeled as something else. I wonder why people would do that.
So fentanyl, if you get it from an analog, if you get it from a source like China, it's incredibly cheap, incredibly inexpensive. We recently, the gang enforcement unit had a bust recently, and got a significant
and this is because it's synthetic?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really understand the chemical elements of this, but so it's very cheap for them to make?
It's cheap. It's cheap to import from China, so I assume it's cheap to make. I mean, that's the only way they make money. But I unfortunately don't know the specifics, and I'm so reluctant. That's probably my biggest fault, is I'm reluctant to speak about something if I'm not absolutely sure about it.
Well, you know what the analogy sounds like? One of the problems that white collar prosecutors have with Wall Street is that these guys are creating new devices with which to manipulate markets faster than the government can learn about them and understand the ramifications of them. When derivative swaps were first instituted, nobody really thought that they would go anywhere, because what it was in effect was an insurance policy without a capital reserve. None of these companies had a capital reserve to back these. But the sale of them was wild because people sought comfort in the idea that they were now insured. But without a capital reserve, that's an illusion. In fact, that's a scam. That's nothing more than just a fraud perpetrated on other financial professionals who, I'm sure,
were well-intentioned.
May have been. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Right.
In the world of big money, I'm guessing what they really wanted it for was to be able to say to the people that they were selling it to, oh well, we've got an agreement with AIG that all of this is insured through this swap program. Well, maybe not.
Criminals are smart.
Well, yeah, and I suspect that the criminal element has probably looked at the pretty much wild success of American big pharma, looking at the way that they have produced and then ultimately marketed Vicodin and hydrocodone and hillbilly heroin and all of those. Certainly the elements of it are completely different because one is completely legal and one is not completely legal. But I'm sure they've looked at it as a little bit of template and said, okay, let's find the places where the supply of some of these dreaded drugs is somehow being inhibited. That's where we go. And unfortunately, the poor people out there that fall victim to this, I know a lot of them come into this world because of an injury. And this is simply a pain management tool. And all of a sudden they're told, well, look, we'll get rid of all the pain and you'll be fine. Without saying, okay, here is the laundry list of reasons why you shouldn't do this.
It's an anecdote. In 2009, my husband and I built a house. And and we built it ourselves with some help from some very good friends and family. But I fell from the second floor.
Uh-oh.
And so I was significantly injured, but we're walking out while I'm being wheeled out of ICU, going home, and my husband looks at me. He's a trooper, and he was in narcotics for a long time. He says, "No more pain meds," and I was like, "No," I understand people in chronic pain.
Yes.
But the reality is that there are other options other than narcotics. But it's incumbent upon them and their physician to work together.
Yeah.
To find a healthy solution that is low risk.
You said something off camera that piqued my interest, that there was significant violent crime, or let's say crime in general, associated with the marijuana trade in WICOMICO.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm told, well, I won't qualify it that way, a number, probably the majority of home invasions that happen in the county and probably regionally are related to the marijuana trade.
Okay.
The illegal, of course, marijuana trade.
Sure.
So that violent crime comes with risk because not only is there a home invasion and people are threatened, but they're threatened with weapons that end up, sometimes being used. And weapons, I mean firearms.
Yeah.
And that's how homicides happen.
Okay. Well, when people are out there in, we used to call it TV land, but let's be frank, it's not anymore. It's now digital platform land. When people are out there looking at this show on Facebook or on YouTube or on Twitter on this, and they're thinking about the upcoming election, talk to them just for a second about why Jamie needs to be there.
I'm committed to public safety. I'm committed to WICOMICO County and your safety, your family's safety, your neighbor's safety, all of us. And I'm willing to forge the partnerships, maintain them, in order to ensure that we are all better off.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Bill.
This is Jamie Dykes, and she is running for State's Attorney in WICOMICO County, Maryland. Thank you for tuning in. And as Louis Goldstein, one of my heroes, always used to say, God bless y'all real good.